My name is Oliver and I've always loved Oliver. Though outdoors at 25, I'd spent countless weekends hiking and camping in the wilderness around Seattle, but none of those trips would compare to the life-changing weekend I spent with my best friend James last summer. James and I had been friends since college, where we met in an environmental science class 3 years ago. He was the kind of person who could light up a room with his smile, with wavy brown hair that always seemed perfectly messy, and green eyes that sparkled when he talked about things he was passionate about. We'd grown close over the years, sharing a love for nature and adventure, though I'd been harboring deeper feelings that I kept carefully hidden. The trip started as a simple plan to escape the city. For a weekend, we'd chosen a remote camping spot in the Olympic National Forest, a place I'd discovered during one of my solo hikes. It was a secluded area near a small lake, far enough from the main trails to offer real solitude. "This is going to be epic," James said as we loaded my Subaru on Friday afternoon. "I need this break so badly. Work has been killing me lately." I watched him toss his backpack into the trunk, noticing how his t-shirt lifted slightly as he reached up, revealing a glimpse of skin. I quickly looked away, focusing on securing our camping gear. The drive took about 3 hours, with James playing DJ and singing along to his eclectic playlist. As we got further from the city, the forests grew denser and the late afternoon sun filtered through the trees in golden streaks. "Remember that camping trip in sophomore year?" James asked, grinning, "when you tried to convince everyone you knew how to start a fire without matches?" I groaned at the memory. In my defense, I had seen it done on YouTube. "Yeah, and we ended up eating cold beans because you were too proud to admit you needed help." He laughed, the sound making my heart skip a beat. We reached the railhead just as the sun was starting to set. It was a mile hike to our camping spot, and we wanted to set up before it got dark. As we shouldered our packs, I noticed James struggling with his sleeping bag. "You okay there?" I asked, watching him adjust the straps repeatedly. "Yeah, just this stupid sleeping bag. The zipper's been acting up." He tugged at it frustratedly. "I meant to get it fixed before the trip, but work got crazy and I forgot." I didn't think much of it at the time, focused instead on leading us down the trail. Before we lost the light, the path was narrow, forcing us to walk single file. I could hear James behind me, his breathing slightly labored as we climbed uphill. The spot was exactly as I remembered it, a small clearing near the lake surrounded by towering pines. The last rays of sunlight were reflecting off the water, creating a stunning panorama. "Nate, this is beautiful," James breathed, dropping his pack and walking to the edge of the clearing. "How did you find this place?" "Got lost on a hike once," I admitted, joining him. "Best wrong turn I ever took." We set up camp, efficiently working together with the familiarity of old friends. I got the tent up while James gathered firewood, and soon we had a cheerful blaze going. The temperature was dropping rapidly, typical for early summer in the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't until we were sitting around the fire eating the camping stir-fry I'd prepared that James brought up the sleeping bag again. "So, I have a bit of a problem," he said, poking at his food. "The zipper on my sleeping bag is completely shot. I tried fixing it earlier, but it's beyond repair." I looked Up my fork halfway to my mouth, how bad is it? He got up and went to his bag, returning with what was essentially a large blanket the zipper had completely separated, rendering it useless as a sleeping bag. The forecast said it's going to drop into the low 40s tonight, I said, concerned the nights could get surprisingly cold even in summer. James ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd come to know well. Yeah, I know. Look, I hate to ask, but your sleeping bag is pretty roomy, right? The one you got for winter camping. My heart started racing at his suggestion. My sleeping bag was indeed a larger model designed for winter camping and rated for below freezing temperatures. It was technically big enough for 2 people, though it would be snug. Yeah, we could make that work, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Better than you freezing to death out here. James smiled, relief evident on his face. Thanks, man, I promise I don't snore much. We spent the next few hours around the campfire talking about everything and nothing. James told stories about his job at the environmental consulting firm, and I shared some of my adventures as a freelance photographer. As the night grew darker and colder, I became increasingly aware of our impending sleeping arrangements. Around midnight, the fire had burned down to embers, and the cold was becoming impossible to ignore. James shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. Should we call it a night, he suggested, his breath visible in the cool air. I nodded, perhaps a bit too quickly. Yeah, good idea. Let me just make sure everything's secure, while James used the portable camp light to find his way to the designated bathroom spot we'd chosen earlier. I did a final check of our campsite. My hands were shaking slightly as I stored our food in the bear-proof container, and I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or nervousness inside the tent. I laid out my sleeping bag while James changed into his sleep clothes, a t-shirt and flannel pajama pants. I tried not to watch as he pulled his shirt over his head, but caught a glimpse of his toned back in the dim light of our lantern. So, how do you want to do this? James asked, standing awkwardly by the tent entrance. You can get in first, I suggested. That way you'll be against the tent wall and won't have to climb over me if you need to get up. He nodded and carefully slipped into the sleeping bag. I turned off the lantern, plunging us into darkness broken only by the moonlight filtering through the tent fabric. Taking a deep breath, I joined him in the sleeping bag. The fit was tight as expected. We lay there stiffly for a few moments, both trying to maintain some semblance of personal space in a situation where that was virtually impossible. I could feel the warmth of his body against mine, smell the wood smoke in his hair from the campfire. This is kind of awkward, isn't it? James whispered, letting out a nervous laugh. A bit, I admitted, but at least you won't freeze. True, mind if I? Shifted, turning onto his side, facing away from me. There, that's better. The new position actually made things worse or better, depending on how you looked at it. Now my chest was pressed against his back, and I had to decide what to do with my arm. After a moment's hesitation, I draped it over his waist, telling myself it was the most practical solution in the confined space. Is this okay? I asked softly. Yeah, he replied, his voice slightly husky. It's comfortable. The tension in his body gradually relaxed, and I felt mine doing the same. The warmth between us was comforting in the cold night air, and despite my racing Thoughts I found myself growing drowsy. Just as I was about to drift off, James spoke again, so quiet I almost missed it. Nate H, have you ever? He paused, taking a shaky breath. Have you ever wanted something but were afraid to admit it? Even to yourself? My heart started pounding so hard I was sure he could feel it against his back. Yeah, I whispered. I have. He was silent for a long moment, and I held my breaths, wondering if I'd said too much or not. Enough. Then slowly he moved his hand to cover mine where it rested on his waist. Intertwining our fingers, the world seemed to stop in that moment. James's hand was warm against mine, his fingers fitting perfectly between my own. Neither of us spoke, but I could feel his heart racing to match my own. Finally, James shifted, turning over to face me in the cramped sleeping bag. Even in the dim moonlight, I could see the intensity in his eyes. Our faces were inches apart, sharing the same breath in the small space. Nate, he whispered, reaching up to touch my face. Hesitantly, I've been wanting to tell you something for a long time, but I was scared it would ruin everything. Me too, I admitted, my voice barely audible. I felt this way since that day you helped me with my photography project in the rain. Remember? He smiled, his thumb brushing along my jawline when we got completely soaked, trying to get the perfect shot of that waterfall. Yeah, I remember. That's when I first realized I was falling for you. The confession hung in the air between us for a moment before I closed the small distance and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, both of us still afraid of crossing a line we couldn't uncross. But then James's hand moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and any hesitation disappeared. The sleeping bag rustled as we shifted closer, our bodies pressing together in the confined space. James's lips were warm and eager against mine, and I could taste the hint of marshmallows from our earlier s'mores. My hand found its way under his t-shirt, exploring the warm skin of his back, feeling the subtle movement of his muscles. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, James rested his forehead against mine. I can't believe this is happening, he whispered. I've imagined this so many times, but I never thought. Me neither, I said, running my fingers through his hair. I was so scared of losing you as a friend. He laughed softly. We're idiots, aren't we all this time? Complete idiots, I agreed, pulling him in for another kiss. We spent the next hour trading kisses and quiet confessions, making up for lost time. James told me about how he'd realized his feelings during our weekly coffee meetups, how he'd catch himself staring when I was focused on editing photos. I admitted to deliberately planning more outdoor activities just to spend time with him, how I'd memorized the way his eyes crinkled when he really smiled. Eventually, exhaustion began to overtake us. James was tracing lazy patterns on my chest with his finger, his head tucked under my chin. What happens when we go back? He asked quietly. To the real world, I mean. I tightened my around him. Whatever we want to happen, I know what I want. I want to be with you properly, no more hiding how I feel. He lifted his head to look at me, his expression vulnerable in the moonlight. I want that too, but it won't be easy work. Our friends, our families, will figure it out together, I promised, kissing his forehead one step at a time. He smiled, settling back against my chest. Together, I like the sound of that. We fell asleep, tangled together in the sleeping bag, the sound of the night forest creating a peaceful backdrop to our newfound Intimacy, I drifted off feeling more content than I had in years. James's steady breathing matching my own. I woke to early morning sunlight filtering through the tent and the gentle sound of bird song. For a moment, I was disoriented. Then I felt James stir against me. During the night, we'd maintained our close position, his head resting on my chest, one leg thrown over mine. The sleeping bag had shifted down to our waists, but our shared body heat had kept us warm. I allowed myself a moment to simply watch him sleep, taking in his peaceful expression and the way his hair fell across his forehead. It felt surreal, like a dream I might wake up from at any moment. As if sensing my gaze, James's eyes fluttered open. He looked confused for a second before his eyes met mine, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Morning," he murmured, stretching slightly, but not moving away. "So last night wasn't just an amazing dream?" I smiled, running my fingers through his sleep tousled hair. "If it was, we are having the same dream." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me with an expression that made my heart skip without warning. He leaned down and kissed me. Morning breath be damned, the kiss was different from last night's, more confident, more certain I could get used to waking up like this, he said when we finally broke apart. Even with the hard ground and camping mat, even with that, he laughed. Then his expression turned more serious, though I wouldn't mind trying it in a real bed sometime. The implication made my pulse quicken. "My apartment's a lot closer to the city than yours," I suggested, trying to sound casual. "Is that an invitation?" His eyes sparkled with mischief. "Maybe, but first," I rolled us over, pinning him beneath me in the sleeping bag. "We have all morning here in this tent." James's response was cut off by my lips finding his again. We spent the next hour exploring each other with increasingly bold touches and kisses, learning what made each other gasp and sigh. The cramped space of the sleeping bag made everything more intimate, forcing us to stay close. Eventually, the growing heat and our growling stomachs forced us to emerge from the tent. The morning was crisp and clear. The lake surfaced like glass in the early light. We moved around each other as we prepared breakfast, stealing kisses and touches at every opportunity, unable to keep our hands to ourselves now that we could finally express our feelings freely. "You know what's funny?" James said, as we sat by the rekindled fire eating the slightly burnt pancakes we'd managed to make. "I almost didn't come on this trip." I looked at him in surprise. "Really? Why not?" He poked at his pancakes with his fork. "I thought it might be too hard being alone with you for a whole weekend. I was afraid I might do something stupid and ruin our friendship. Then my sleeping bag actually broke, and I almost used it as an excuse to back out." "I'm glad you didn't," I said, reaching over to take his hand, though I'm starting to wonder if that sleeping bag was really broken, or if you planned it. He laughed, squeezing my hand. "I wish I was that clever. No, it really did break, but maybe it was fate's way of giving us a push we both needed." After breakfast, we decided to explore the area around the lake. The trail was not out, forcing us to walk single file, but now James would occasionally grab my hand to help me over fallen logs. Lingering longer than necessary, we found a small waterfall feeding into the lake and stopped to take photos, though now instead of just landscape shots, we took several of us together, my camera's timer capturing our first pictures as a couple near the waterfall. We found a sun-warmed rock large enough for both of us to sit on. James settled between my legs, leaning back against my chest as we watched the water cascade down the rocks. This feels so natural, he said, playing with my fingers where they rested on his stomach. Being with you like this, I was so worried it would be weird or awkward. I pressed a kiss to his neck, feeling him shiver slightly. I know what you mean. It's like everything's different, but also exactly the same different, but the same, James repeated thoughtfully, like how I still want to tell you about every stupid thing that happens at work, but now I also want to kiss you while I'm telling the stories the afternoon past. In a peaceful blend of hiking, swimming in the surprisingly warm lake, and long conversations about our future, we talked about practical things, how we'd handle telling our friends whether we should keep our relationship quiet at work initially, and more personal hopes and fears my parents might take some time to adjust, James admitted as we lay on a blanket by the lake, his head resting on my chest. They're not unfriendly about LGBTQ plus stuff, but they've always had this image of me settling down with a nice girl having kids. I ran my fingers through his hair soothingly. We can take it slow with them. There's no rush to tell anyone until we are ready. He lifted his head to look at me. What about your family? My sister already knows I'm gay, I said. She probably suspects how I feel about you. She's been teasing me about my obvious crush for months. James grinned. Really? What did she say? That I light up like a Christmas tree whenever your name comes up in conversation. I felt my cheeks heat up at the admission. That's adorable, he said, leaning up to kiss me. What started as a playful peck quickly deepened into something more heated. Before I knew it, James had shifted to straddle my hips, his hands sliding under my t-shirt. James, I gasped as his lips found my neck. We're kind of in the open here, he laughed. Against my skin, we're miles from anyone else, he murmured, but he pulled back slightly, his eyes dark with desire. Though maybe we should save this for tonight. The promise in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. Tonight, I agreed, pulling him down for one more kiss before we reluctantly separated. As the day progressed, we found ourselves growing more comfortable with casual displays of affection. When we cooked dinner together, James would wrap his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder to supervise my cooking while gathering firewood. I'd catch him watching me with a soft smile that made my heart flutter. That evening, we sat by the fire talking about our favorite memories together, now seeing them through the lens of our mutual attraction. The night grew colder, but we were prepared this time, wrapped in a blanket together beside the flame. Remember that time we got caught in that thunderstorm during the hiking trip last fall? James asked, tracing patterns on my palm with his finger when we had to take shelter in that old ranger station. How could I forget? I smiled at the memory. We were soaked to the bone. I wanted to kiss you so badly that day, he confessed. You looked so good with your hair all wet and messy, and we were standing so close. Why didn't you? He shrugged. Same reason you didn't, I guess. Too scared to risk what we had. I turned to face him, cupping his face in my hands. Well, we're not scared anymore, are we? His answer was to close the distance between us, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that held all the passion we'd been holding back for so long. The blanket fell forgotten as we lost ourselves in each other, the crackling fire and the star-filled sky our only witnesses later that night in the privacy of our tent we made love for the first time. It was tender and passionate, filled with whispered confessions and gentle touches, our bodies moving together as if we'd done this 1,000 times before. The sleeping bag that had brought us together became our sanctuary, containing our soft moans and declarations of love. We woke on Sunday morning to the patter of light rain on the tent canvas. James was curled against me, his arm draped possessively across my chest, our legs tangled together. The events of the previous night played through my mind, bringing a smile to my face. I can hear you thinking, James mumbled against my neck, his voice rough with sleep. I turned to kiss his forehead. Good thoughts, very good thoughts. He lifted his head, his hair adorably mused, and smiled at me with such affection it made my heart ache. No regrets, none, I assured him, pulling him closer, except maybe that we waited so long to do this. We spent the morning in the tent, listening to the rain and trading lazy kisses, neither of us wanting to break the SB of our private world. Eventually, though, we knew we had to pack up and head back to reality as we dismantled our campsite, working together with the same efficiency as always, but now with stolen kisses between tasks. James suddenly stopped and looked at me thoughtfully. What is it? I asked, pausing in my attempt to fold the tent. I was just thinking, this place will always be special now. Our place. He gestured around at the clearing, the lake now misty with rain. Where every changed, I dropped the tent and walked over to him, pulling him into my arms. We should make it a tradition. Come back here every year, same weekend. I'd like that, he said, wrapping his arms around my waist. Though maybe next time we should bring 2 working sleeping bags, you know, just for appearance's sake. I laughed, and they're not used them exactly. He grinned, kissing me quickly before returning to his packing. The hike back to the car was slower than our arrival, partly because of the rain-slick trail, but mostly because we kept stopping to kiss against trees or simply hold each other, reluctant to leave our sanctuary. As we loaded our gear into the car, James suddenly grabbed my hand. Wait, he said, pulling me back toward him. Before we go back, he pressed me against the car and kissed me deeply, his hands cradling my face. I melted into the kiss, my fingers gripping his wet jacket, drawing him closer. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. I love you, Nate. I think I have for a long time. I just didn't let myself admit it. My heart soared at his words. I love you too, I whispered back, meaning it with every fiber of my being. The drive back to Seattle was different from our journey out. James still played DJ, but now he held my hand over the center console, only letting go when I needed both hands for driving. We talked about everything and nothing, our plans for the week ahead, how we'd tell our friends, what movie we'd watch on our first official date. As we approached the city, the familiar skyline coming into view, James squeezed my hand. You know what's funny, he said, I was so worried about going back to the real world, but now I'm kind of excited. Yeah, I glanced at him, seeing my own happiness reflected in his face. Yeah, because now I get to do all the normal things we always do: coffee runs, movie nights, hiking trips, but I also get to kiss you and hold you and fall asleep next to you. He brought our joined hands to his lips, kissing my knuckles. It's like getting to fall in love with my best friend all over again. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. It's perfect, I agreed, you're perfect, as we drove through the city streets. Heading toward James's apartment, I couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed in just 2 days. A broken sleeping bag had led to the most important revelation of my life, transforming a friendship ship into something even more beautiful. When I pulled up outside his building, neither of us moved to get out. Immediately, the rain had followed us back to the city, creating a cozy bubble around us. In the car, stay tonight, James asked softly. I'm not ready to let you go. Yet I leaned over and kissed him gently. I'm not ready to let you go either, not tonight, not ever. As we carried his camping gear up to his apartment, stealing kisses in the elevator and laughing like teenagers, I knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of our story. That broken sleeping bag hadn't just given us one magical weekend, it had given us a future together filled with promise and possibility. In some way, the Olympic National Forest, our little clearing by the lake, waited for our return, ready to witness more chapters in our love story in the years to come.